Welcome to the CrossCounsel podcast. We believe every person is created in the image of God, something we can never lose. Yet, over time, our likeness to Christ has been diminished and is in need of restoration. Each episode offers information that invites you toward transformation, leading to formation in Christ. But lasting change happens when you personally engage with our ministry and experience the melt process, where God renews the mind, heals the heart, and restores hope. Together, though none of us has arrived, we're discovering what it means to be fully alive in Him, immediate help, lasting hope, and changing generations. Hey everyone, I know many of you were excited to hear Mary on our last two podcast episodes, and she'll be returning for the next several as well. But as I was reviewing one of our recent facilitator classes, two spontaneous testimonies surfaced that we thought you'd really appreciate hearing. In this particular class, Chuck, who many of you know from the two previous podcasts he's been on, plus episode 175, was hosting. These gatherings have connected people I've known for many years, and it's been fun to see the cross-pollination happening as new bridges are being built long distance. When Chuck asked the group about the transformation they've experienced, Susan Hulet was the first to share. Many of you don't know Susan personally, and even more may not realize she's on our CrossCounsel board. I'm thrilled for you to get to hear her voice today. Many know her as the founder of Mercy House in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a ministry that has offered hope and dignity to single pregnant women for nearly 30 years. Susan and her husband, Pastor Eric Hulet, have been spiritual parents to many over the years. When we mentioned their names to the pastors at Soma Church in Tyler, Texas, they practically melted because of the impact the Hulets have had on their lives. The context of what Susan first shares needs to be shared with you. And the class already knew it, because in her session from the week or two before, Susan had revisited her father's suicide when she was 20 years old. And she happened to be pregnant with her first child at the time. She connected in a profound way to the Lord's truth and love in ways she didn't even know she needed. Then she also recalls her very first melt or transformational prayer session. In that session, she refers to her body's reaction, called an ABE reaction. Our bodies can remember trauma on a cellular level, and this stored trauma can surface or resurface when someone chooses to truly go to their pain experientially. As bizarre and mysterious as this is, I believe it's a gift from the Lord to help us come out of the shadows and face our pain.
Do you guys have any of your own testimonies you wanted to share from past or maybe the last one?
Well, the last one was so good, and I have just thought over and over about what the Lord said. This is the beginning of the end. This was the beginning of the end for you.
Yeah.
And I was sharing that with my husband while we were driving, and he just really kind of resonated with it. At least he really listened and received that. And that was when I was 20 years old. I'm 71 now.
Oh, okay.
So we're talking about 51 years ago.
Yeah.
That began the beginning of the end, which you think, okay, well, when is this going to end? But the point is that something broke there that I didn't realize. And
Yeah.
it just kind of moves me even to think about it, not in a sad way at all, but just in a grateful way. I realize that the Lord had so much more He was doing in my life, and that even that thing, that terrible thing, turned for good. And it's this fulfillment of He causes all things to work together for good to those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And I just would never, I knew that in my head, but to really get a direct word about it in terms of what that all meant for me, the beginning of the end, just, it's really been profound. And, there have been a few times in my TPM journey where I got such a profound word and it stayed with me, and it's kind of like become sort of a mantra, in that sense of just a repeated truth. And that's one of them. Another one the Lord gave me once, just regarding family and such is, I never called you to be the sheriff. And it's all about that fixing and control and, but that was another one that I say to myself, I wasn't called to be the sheriff, but it was almost not really humorous, but just with the Lord just factually saying, Susan, you are not the sheriff. And that's kind of a word in our family anyway.
Oh,
Who
okay.
made you sheriff? That has been really special. But I had an unusual experience with my very first TBM session. It was with Karen Sebastian at the
Okay.
time, now Karen Worth. I had been going to class and participating, learning under Mary Carlton, and I had an abreaction. So where the Lord took me was to this memory that I had suppressed it for years and years because I was a midwife for 20 years, and
Oh,
the suppressed memory was of a baby that I delivered, but the baby was dead. I remember starting to remember that experience, and I started to cry and I started to sob, and I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and cried. And when I finished, Karen said to me, Susan, do you know how long you've been crying? And I said, maybe 10 minutes. Because she didn't interrupt me. She just let me cry. And she said, you've been crying for 45 minutes. I mean, it was just like, whoa, I really needed that. And
yeah.
the Lord spoke to me through it, but she said that was the first time she had ever had that happen. And she said, I'm just really
Yeah.
glad that I'm at the point in my facilitating journey that I can handle that and that I knew what to do, because I just I didn't like lose it. Like I wasn't screaming or, hitting things or anything. I was just sobbing, just crying, sobbing, really out of time. Like I was not aware, really,
Yeah.
truly. And so I came home, told my husband about it. He went, what exactly are you getting into? It was like, oh,
What kind of a deal is this?
it was weird because for the very first session, and I mean, it was not something I was making up. I really was not even cognizant of the time, or just that I was just safe there with
Right.
Karen and with the Lord. I guess those are my testimonies.
Yeah,
I
that's
have
amazing.
had some normal sessions in between that one and the one I
Well,
just had.
they're all good. They're all good for sure.
Yeah, but like not quite so dramatic. But
Yeah.
I've never heard of anyone else having one of those. No one's ever testified of that. And maybe that will be helpful to someone at some point if that happens.
In terms of what, like the long length of time you were crying, or
Yes, and the intensity of it, because
yeah.
I had stuffed this experience. So I walked through that with that woman. I
Yeah.
took her through the postpartum. I went to the funeral.
Mm.
I went to the funeral. It happened 1 week before my birthday, and I remember on my birthday, I sobbed and cried, and then I just shut it down. I stuffed it, and I just moved on.
Mm.
And I really had some residue of feeling responsible for
Yeah. Yeah.
that death, even though I was not responsible. I hadn't done anything wrong. There was no like neglect in my care, but I mean, she was under my care when it happened.
That was awesome. Okay. Now, the next person who shares her testimony is Terris Tamashiro Harris. You may remember her from our CrossCounsel podcast, The Truth Within the Story, parts 1 and 2, episodes 148 and 149, where she talked about her journey with CrossCounsel and how that experience, along with her work with Mercy House, shaped her novel, Love Remains. It's a deeply personal story of grief, healing, and redemption that grew out of her own encounter with God's goodness. Now, Terry has been a part of our community for years, and her testimony on this podcast followed right on the heels of her dear friend Susan. We often speak about the profound connections between our bodies and our souls, and Terry's story highlights that reality in a remarkable way. What once overwhelmed her, stress that would build and manifest into days-long migraines, simply no longer happens. What makes this so remarkable is that this shift happened over 15 years ago, and it has stayed constant. Terry pours a great deal of her time into her work as the founder of Torch Runner Books, and she has been a major part of the ministry of Mercy House alongside Susan. Her life reflects the kind of ongoing transformation we talk about so often here. Now here's Terry.
Every session that, ends with truth it's worthy of a testimony, right? Because there's such peace and freedom that comes. And that's what I loved about the YouTube video was that, just how it was reaffirming how to tell if that was really God that brought that. And so, actually one of mine was very interesting. It was it was with Steve ministering to me. He was here in Fort Worth and leading a session at someone's house. And I volunteered. And
Real quick, Terry, were you new at that time, or had you had a few sessions?
No, I was not new. In fact, I'd probably been in it for at least a few years at that time.
Okay. Yeah.
Probably more than that. But what I decided to deal with was this pain that I kept having in my neck that would, I figured that it was tied to something I was believing because it always happened whenever I was faced with decisions. And we were in the middle of a home remodel, and I had to make all these decisions. And each time, my contractor told me that every time I ask you a question, I see your hand go to your neck, and so, and without fail, those would develop into a full-blown migraine. And then I would, be in bed for 2 days or whatever. Anyway, what it came down to was that the truth that I got to was that I make good decisions with God. I make good decisions. And, it's like us making decisions together. I'm not in it alone. I don't have to do all this on my own. And that brought me such peace because, it wasn't all up to me, how everything turned out wasn't all up to the decisions I was making. And it went way beyond that home remodel. It was with everything, all the decisions that have to be made. And so I've told this to Steve before, I have not had a migraine since that time.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That is awesome.
Wow.
I know, it's incredible.
I've heard about that when I first did Theophostic prayer ministry like over 20 years ago. I did it in the area where I lived at the time. And I had heard them talking about the pastor was a pastor I did it with, the pastor talking about how sometimes through this, people do get physical healing. So, but this is the first time I've actually heard about it, which is pretty cool. I mean, like a testimony. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, I remember the reason that I chose to deal with that one that way is because I remembered in a class that Mary was teaching, we covered that about how, it does sometimes, a lot of the things we believe manifest themselves physically. And so physical healing can come about because, when we receive truth in those places. Yeah.
Wow, isn't that amazing? That makes you wonder almost like in the times of the the Bible, those healings that took place, were they in some part just what people were believing? The paralytic that was by the pool, and Jesus said, "Get up and walk," and
Yeah.
Mm.
you know what I mean? Like those miracles. I'm just thinking out loud.
Well,
Like,
they were being touched by truth himself. I
yeah.
mean, he is the truth. And so he imparted truth.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real interesting idea to consider.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's profound. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I talked on the video, but I mean, for me, every session I have is worthy of testimony. You know what I mean? Whatever God does. And sometimes, the hard part for me was because early on in my sessions, I'm just one of, not everyone gets this, but I had really, like you were talking, Susan, about these dramatic tear provoking experiences. They were almost all like that. Like
Wow.
so much pain that I had been carrying my whole life, and then the lies being revealed and God, the Lord's truth. It just, I don't know why. I don't know why. And a lot of my sessions are like that. But what was hard for me in being a facilitator was understanding that some people get truth and they don't have that. There isn't like a big dramatic. So I was always waiting for this big dramatic thing, and sometimes it didn't happen. Sometimes it was just like they got this. It was just like a quiet, yeah, I get it. I have the truth from the Lord. It wasn't a lot of emotion, which that was for me just something as a facilitator I had to learn that everyone's different.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has a different makeup, and and truthfully, a lot of the guys I worked with, and some women, they're just really guarded. They don't go there. They're like, no way, I'm not letting it up. But after a while, working and working and working it, there's been times where there's been definitely freedom in that way too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
I think that's a really good exhortation because I think I do tend to evaluate it based on how I respond rather than realizing that, everyone has a process that is their emotional process. And because there have been times that I've ministered or facilitated rather, and just kind of wondered, well, but they would come back and say, that was really profound for me. I have a pastor's wife friend that I've had a couple sessions with,
Mm-hmm.
and, she just received truth. But then afterward told me that was life changing. So,
Yeah.
but it wasn't emotional.
Right.
It just
At least we
wasn't.
didn't. At least we didn't see it.
Right. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
I hope you benefited from both Susan and Terry's testimonies. Chuck's additional comments are also worth careful consideration. It's incredibly rewarding to hear him and so many others in our classes grow in experience, step into ministry with confidence, and begin to speak naturally in the language of transformational living and the MELT process principles. I want to press in on something very significant that goes beyond this class's discussion. Many Christian leaders and teachers emphasize getting into the presence of God or being in the presence of God. I'm certainly not criticizing that outright. There is beauty and truth in it. And as CrossCounsel moves more and more into formation in Christ, that is certainly worthy of our pursuit. But there is something crucial that I'd like to challenge you with in that arena. Now, the Lord is free to do whatever good He chooses to do. He can work with anyone who is opening themselves up to Him and His Spirit. That said, I don't believe the Lord minds a bit when we invite some discernment into the process. Here are some questions and thoughts to help you test when you sense God's presence. One of the things that makes the acronym MELT so helpful is how naturally it walks us through the process. M, memory, E, emotion, L, lie or false belief, T, truth, which then leads to the fruit of transformation. Let's walk through the melt process with those letters in mind. M, memory. First, what is the context of what you were believing? Beliefs don't form in isolation. They form in specific moments where something happened that made a certain interpretation feel true. You may have even entered this moment because of current circumstances or out of a desire or even a desperation to connect with the Lord. Understanding this context is the memory component. E, emotion. What was your heart feeling when you first began to press into this? Has that emotion shifted? And if so, why has it shifted? Has it genuinely changed at a heart level, or has it simply been set aside or overshadowed by distraction? L, lie. Is there something your heart was believing that it is no longer believing? Can you still feel the weight or power of that lie, or has it lost its grip? This is the lie or false belief component where we test what feels true, not just what we know is true. And T, truth. Is there a truth your heart now understands in context? This truth should naturally correspond to the lie you're no longer believing. This is transformative truth, truth that reaches the heart, not just the intellect. And then comes the longer test, again with transformation. It's the fruit that confirms the process of what the Lord has done. Has my life transformed in any measurable way? Is the fruit of the Spirit emerging in places where it wasn't present before? Terry can certainly now measure the truth of the Spirit's work, as she, after many, many years, no longer has migraines. That is transformation. But as a reminder, there are people who have experienced profound transformation from the Lord without sensing His presence, without seeing anything, and without hearing anything audible or internal. Some people receive what we often call a sense of truth, something that seems to rise up in their hearts that goes beyond their own thinking. It's not self-generated. It's something the Lord places within them, and it changes them in ways that cannot be explained by insight alone. And that, too, is genuine transformation. Thank you for listening to the CrossCounsel podcast. We invite you to visit CrossCounsel.com to learn more about genuine healing and becoming a more useful instrument in God's kingdom purposes. Be sure to like, subscribe, rate, and share this podcast. It helps others discover the same potential for hope and healing found only in Jesus. Again, thank you for listening.